Welcome to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy. Loki's season finale finally introduced Kang the Conqueror into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the show's creators left his origin very ambiguous. They don't even call him Kang, he's
he who remains.
But trust me, this is definitely a variant of Kang the Conqueror, the badass Marvel villain that's going to appear life-sized in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. A couple years ago, I made a video about the Young Avengers coming to the MCU where I threw out a theory. After watching Loki, I definitely think that theory is true. Kang the Conqueror is a descendant of Tony Stark. I'm going to explain how this fits perfectly into Phase 4, Tony's arc as a hero, and the overall story of the MCU. So in the comics, Kang is actually a descendant of Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. Now this made the movie rights to the character Kang kind of dicey, since Fox owned the film rights to Reed and all the Fantastic Four related characters. After Disney bought Fox, we are finally going to see the Fantastic Four in the MCU. It's about time after we had to endure this.
It's clobbering time. There is only doom.
So I don't think Kang is going to be related to Reed, just because they'll want to introduce Reed on his own terms, so new audiences won't think of Reed Richards as that guy who's related to Kang. But it would make sense if Kang was a descendant of another scientist in the MCU. So sure, it could be Banner, or Selvig, or Peter Parker, or really anybody except Batman.
Batman's a scientist.
It's not Batman.
Even though those are possibilities, I think Kang will definitely be a relative of Tony Stark. First of all, Avengers Endgame went out of their way to introduce Morgan Stark to the MCU, to show that Tony's family line would continue. In the movie, Morgan is his anchor, the reason he doesn't want to risk one last adventure.
I got my second chance right here, Cap. Can't roll the dice on it.
But they didn't need that anchor to tell his story. Tony could have still just been bitter following their defeat and reluctant to help the team.
I said we'd lose. You said, we'll do that together too. And guess what, Cap? We lost. And you weren't there.
But instead, they made sure that we knew that his DNA would live on. There's also evidence that Morgan inherited her dad's intelligence, like how she instinctively understood that loving someone 3,000 was a multiple of the normal affection that you can share. So presumably, Tony's smarts will live on. We've also seen that Howard Stark was a genius. Mostly. So it stands to reason that the Stark DNA is filled with smarts. In the comics, Kang is known as a master of time, so forget the multiverse. His thing is traveling through history to conquer all of time. And Tony Stark, his descendant, invented time travel. I think it's highly likely that the Avengers, or Pepper, or maybe even Tony, preemptively, took measures to make sure that the time travel technology was destroyed. They couldn't risk it falling into the hands of someone like Kang. And yet, Tony might have kept records buried deep in Friday's servers. If Kang was a descendant of Tony, then maybe his computers and tech would have been passed down through the generations, and 31st century technology could have easily broken Tony's encryption of this data. In fact, Tony was able to crack time travel how? By modeling it as...
This time in the shape of a Mobius strip, inverted, please.
Wow. Shit.
So when the TVA mind-wiped and brainwashed a certain variant, He Who Remains could have observed the irony in calling Owen Wilson Mobius. So this means that, inadvertently, Tony Stark is responsible for all this evil.
My fault.
Just like before he even became a hero, he was responsible for pain and suffering around the planet.
When the first shell hits 2 floors below, it makes a hole in the floor. Our parents go in. I grab her, roll under the bed, and the second shell hits. But it doesn't go off. Sits there in the rubble, 3 feet from our faces. And on the side of the shell is painted one word: Stark.
So this goes back to a theme that runs deep in the MCU, original sin. This is a Christian belief that humanity is inherently tainted by sin, because we all inherited the original sin of Adam and Eve lying to God and being banished from the Garden of Eden.
We ate the forbidden fruit. Quick! We must hide ourselves!
Tony Stark's career as Iron Man began in original sin. Before building this thing in a cave with a box of scraps, he made billions of dollars creating weapons of war.
Yeah, peace. I love peace. I'll be out of a job with peace.
His first mission as Iron Man was to stop terrorists from using his weapons. And he was also motivated by Jensen's last words.
Don't waste it. Don't waste your life.
Meaning that now he has to live a life to cleanse his original sin. But this is also in other movies. In Captain America's case, the original sin was Hydra. They ended up infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D., brainwashing Bucky, and slowly undoing everything that Steve sacrificed himself for in World War II.
Your death amounts to the same as your life, a zero sum.
Thor's original sin was Odin's bloodthirsty conquest of the Nine Realms, a bloodlust that he inherited.
What action would you take?
March into Jotunheim as you once did. Teach them a lesson. Break their spirits so they'll never dare try to cross our borders again.
And then had to outgrow.
Asgard's not a place, it's a people.
Bruce Banner, when he became Hulk, put Betty in the hospital. Scott Lang was a thief. Guardians of the Galaxy, sinners, one and all.
What if someone does something irksome and I decide to remove his spine?
That's actually murder.
All of this is to say that the MCU heroes all have haunted paths and are trying to atone, trying to be worthy. Endgame was all about the heroes overcoming their mistakes in Infinity War. They wanted to do right. Their mantra was,
whatever it takes.
In context, this means that they're willing to sacrifice their lives. But by inventing time travel, they actually sacrifice their future and their children's future. And just like with climate change, it's the next generation that will have to fix their mess.
How dare they?
The Young Avengers are coming to the MCU. Nearly every member of the team has been introduced or will be introduced. In the comics, they were formed when the Avengers were disbanded, like they are now in the MCU.
Like a band? Like the Beatles?
Then, a teenage Kang, who wasn't evil yet, traveled into the past and activated a dormant computer program to find new Avengers to replace the team. And what superhero name did Kang call himself when he was a teenager? Iron Lad. So it would be appropriate if teenage Kang named himself after his famous ancestor, Iron Man. He might have even already been Iron Man in the 31st century. After all, we saw that Morgan took an interest in the armor, so maybe it's been passed down throughout the millennia. Tony inspiring future generations to be good and evil is a perfect way for his arc to continue. When you step back and look at the three phases of the MCU, you can see that they're all about Tony learning how to become a father. First, he has to overcome issues with his own dad in Iron Man 2. Then, he gets a spunky protege in Iron Man 3.
So now you're just gonna leave me here, like my dad?
Yeah.
Afterwards, he tries out being a father by creating Ultron.
Aw, Junior. You're gonna break your old man's heart.
And he's moved to sign the Sokovia Accords by a mother grieving for her son.
His name was Charlie Spencer. You murdered him.
Then he takes on a surrogate son, Peter Parker.
I just wanted him to be like you.
And I wanted you to be better. Gotta sound like my dad.
And finally, he actually becomes a father, incorporating all the lessons he's learned from his failures. So it makes sense if the next phase of the MCU would follow his descendants, and the heroes and villains who inherit his power. I mean, we've already seen this in Far From Home, when his careless actions have reverberated and created new villains.
Barf. To the man who brought us all together, our former boss, Tony Stark.
And the army of killer drones he left to a teenager that almost destroyed the world. Another example of Tony's carelessness. But even apart from Tony's arc, look at He Who Remains. His tech seems to incorporate Wakandan technology. Just like Tony Stark used Wakandan tech to create his nano armor, according to the canon book The Wakanda Files. The wristband that he uses as a time-control device seems very similar to the time-regulating wristbands that Tony designed in Endgame.
Fully functioning time-space GPS.
Then there's Miss Minutes, a high-functioning AI who might be alive.
Are you recording or are you alive?
Sort of both.
Tony Stark created his first two AIs in college. He's kind of the resident expert on this.
Good evening, boss.
And since then, he's created a few more, including Friday and Karen.
Activating instant kill.
No.
But mostly, He Who Remains has inherited Tony Stark's personality.
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Remember his description of when all the different variants met each other.
For a while, there was peace. Narcissistic, self-congratulatory peace. I love your shoes. I love your hair. Oh, man. Nice nose. Thanks, man. Etc.
Tony was the MCU's #1 narcissist.
How does it look?
Like Christmas, but with more me. I'm the best.
And remember, this is also the reason he was originally kept out of the Avengers.
Textbook narcissism. Agreed?
After Tony became Iron Man, he relished in his celebrity. Flaunted government oversight.
I have successfully privatized world peace.
Arrogantly invited a superhero to come to his home.
Here's my home address.
then created Ultron without questioning himself.
I don't want to hear the man was not meant to meddle medley.
And then he did it again.
I'm in a loop. I'm caught in a time loop. This is exactly where it all went wrong.
I know.
The point is, no one has a bigger ego than Tony Stark. Kang is a look at what Tony would have become if he didn't have people like Pepper to check his worst impulses.
Only reason I haven't cracked up is probably because you moved in.
But would you be able to rest?
Better security! I was attacked!
Tony is 100% the kind of person to build a giant statue of himself, then create propaganda to make himself sound like a god.
But then Tony Stark, whose daddy loved him very much, created the sacred timeline.
But mostly, I think they're related because Tony Stark was a futurist. After the Battle of New York, he had PTSD.
You've experienced a severe anxiety attack.
Me? Tony literally saw his worst nightmare and then carefully planned out how to prevent this catastrophe. So he made a logical evaluation. He needed to create a higher power to protect Earth.
Artificial intelligence.
After Sokovia, Tony is still a futurist. He knows that the heroes have to be kept in check or there will be catastrophes. Clint even throws this logic back in his face.
The futurist, gentlemen! The futurist is here! He sees all. He knows what's best for you, whether you like it or not.
And from what we've seen, He Who Remains is also a futurist. Like, literally. He has literally planned out the future and past. He talks about the timeline like he's run different calculations.
I've lived 1,000,000 lifetimes. I've gone through every scenario. This is the only way.
So I'm pretty excited about Kang and the future of the MCU, and I really hope that we have this connection to Tony Stark in his literal and metaphorical DNA. I think it would be great to see the Young Avengers step up and correct their predecessors' mistakes. But what do you think about this theory? Do you want to see this happen? Do you have any other theories about the MCU you want to share? Let me know in the comments or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe.
See you soon.
For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.